Welcome, everyone. Tomorrow, we'll be observing the fast of Asarah Tevet, the 10th day of Tevet, which commemorates when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia, besieged Jerusalem, which 2.5 years later culminated on Tisha B'Av, destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. There is a very interesting comment made in Halacha and Jewish law regarding the 10th of Tevet. It's kind of a theoretical, but it's an interesting comment that is brought down. And that is that we know that other than Yom Kippur, if a fast day falls out on Shabbos, we do not observe it on Shabbos. We push it off for Sunday. So it is brought down that were Asarah B'Teves, were the 10th of Teves, to come out on Shabbos, it would be observed. And it's based on a verse, it's not a derivation according to Torah law, but it's based on a verse that this is based on. Now, again, it's theoretical. The 10th of Teves does not fall out on Shabbos, ever. But we would observe it. And this year, we're doing something very, very interesting, not usual. That is that Asarah B'Teves was falling out on Friday. We're going to be going into Shabbos fasting. And it is brought down that in the time in history when Tisha B'Av would fall out or could have fallen out on Friday. So then once you bring in Shabbos, you don't complete the fast. However, if Asarah B'Teves falls out on Friday and it enters into Shabbos and you've already begun Shabbos, you still have to wait for the night to break your fast. So what's the uniqueness of Asarah B'Teves? So the Chassam Sofer, Rav Moshe Schreiber, famous Chassam Sofer from over 200 years ago, gave the following fascinating insight into Asarah B'Teves itself. And he explains that the fact that the prophet decreed that the 10th of Teves would be a fast day, because that was the day the siege was laid. And nothing happened until 2.5 years later, but we're still commemorating this siege. And the Chassam Sofer explains that the reason for that is because on that Asarah B'Teves, on that day, the first time that the siege was laid by Nebuchadnezzar, he says as Nebuchadnezzar laid siege on the Jerusalem below, here on earth, there was a judgment in Shemayim. The heavenly court was debating for 2.5 years as to whether this will culminate in destruction of the Beis Hamikdash or not, until eventually those who were demanding in heaven, the heavenly court, that the Beis Hamikdash be destroyed, were victorious. They won. Now, our sages say, Kol dar shlo nivna Beis Hamikdash b'yamav kilu nechra b'yamav. Any generation that the Beis Hamikdash has not been rebuilt in is like a generation which has been destroyed, which means that in a certain way, every year, the Beis Hamikdash is being destroyed. And if so, says the Chassam Sofer, the same way on the first Asarah B'Teves, there was a judgment in heaven as to whether the Beis Hamikdash would be destroyed or not. Every year on Asarah B'Teves, just on the first one, there was a judgment on every Asarah B'Teves every year. This is a judgment in heaven regarding this year's destruction. So it comes out that Asarah B'Teves is a day of judgment, a day they're being judged regarding the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash for this year. Will it be rebuilt? Will it not be rebuilt? How much shall we be contributing to it this year towards the building? It all makes a big difference on how the year will be regarding a year without the Beis Hamikdash and the Galus and the exile and the ramifications of that. So every Asarah B'Teves is a judgment for the coming year, what will be with the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, says the Chassam Sofer, there's an essential difference between Asarah B'Teves and Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a fast about what has happened in the past. Asarah B'Teves is about what's going to be in the future. Our fast in Asarah B'Teves is meant to determine and help regarding the decree for the coming year regarding the Beis Hamikdash being destroyed, remaining destroyed. And the same way there is a halacha that if a person has a bad dream, that there are circumstances where you fast for a bad dream, and that can be done on Shabbos. Why? Because since it's meant to relieve you of a worry of something pending, you can do that on Shabbos. Well, on Asarah B'Teves, we're fasting because of the fact that we're trying to deal with a pending danger, a pending tragedy. What will be this year regarding the Beis Hamikdash? And therefore, we can fast on it because our fasting is meant to make us in some way feel better that we're doing something towards dealing with the impending danger or the danger that we could possibly be facing. So Asarah B'Teves is a day of judgment and a day that we have to do something, and that we do. We fast, we pray about determining that judgment. But clearly there's more for us to do. And especially we who are in the exile of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash. The Talmud says the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam. The spiritual and essential cause of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash was hatred amongst the Jewish people. And as has been written by many, that if we can rectify that, then the Beis Hamikdash comes back. And if we don't, it doesn't come back. It delays its return. And the more we do to become more unified, the more we bring the Beis Hamikdash return closer. So tomorrow is definitely a day to be focused on this. And as been pointed out, the tragedy in Eretz Yisrael on October 7th on Shmini Atzeres has brought a unity amongst the Jewish people that we haven't seen in a very long time. But as also been pointed out, we need to keep it going. We need to strengthen it. And one of the ways to strengthen it again is to increase our unity amongst each other, which means that we have to be careful to increase our acts of kindness for one another. We have to make sure not to speak badly about one another, not to speak lashon hara. We need to focus and work on giving people the benefit of the doubt, to see people in a more positive light, and to be sensitive and caring. This doesn't happen overnight, but when we commit to it and work towards becoming better, that can make a huge difference in the returning of the Beis Hamikdash. I want to share with you a beautiful story that I saw that relates to this week's parsha. After Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, so he gives them instruction. He says, "Ma'aruv alu elavi, quickly go up to my father. Quickly go. Here I am. Tell him I'm here in Egypt. It's time for everybody to come down to me." He tells them, "Ma'aruv alu elavi, hurry, go quickly to my father." What's the rush? So the commentator Sefruno explains the rush is so that my father Yaakov shouldn't have to suffer any bit more. The quicker you go to our father, the less suffering he'll go through. He's suffering right now. Yaakov doesn't know what's going on, and he's been suffering for years. But Yosef says, hurry. Make sure that you can alleviate his suffering as soon as possible. So the story is told of a Rav. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Skula. He must have passed away over 50 years ago. And he was known as the Sadavna Rav. And he had a practice on Purim Day, that he would get up early, daven early, hear the Megillah early, and then make the rounds through all the shuls in Borough Park, collecting tzedakah, collecting charity for the poor. And he basically spent a whole morning doing it, nonstop. Didn't eat yet, didn't have breakfast, nonstop. Finally, he came home shortly before noon, and he had a practice that not only did he have a Purim meal closer to the end of Purim, at the end of the day of Purim, but he also had an earlier one. He had two meals that day. And when he came home, the table was already set, ready to go. But he wasn't going to start eating yet because he had all the money and all the change in his pockets, and all that money needed to be organized. So he emptied out his pockets, all the money and change on the table. Him and his children were organizing it. And suddenly he gasped. And he noticed a $100 bill. Now, $100 bills don't get passed around so easily, even nowadays. And in those days, $100 was a lot more than it is now. Worth a lot more than it is now. And he knew that no one ever gave him a $100 bill. And it had to have been a mistake. But who was the mistake? Then he realized that there was someone who always gave him a $10 bill, which again in those days was a lot. And he surmised that what had happened is that he pulled out the bill, he saw the 1 and the 0, but he didn't notice a third 0, and he handed it to him. When that came to mind, he quickly ran to put on his coat and leave. And his family begged him, "You've been running around a whole day. Eat first and then go." He says, "No, I am sure this person thinks that he lost $100. He's in distress over it, and I cannot let him be in distress longer than he needs to be." So he put on his coat, children tagging along, and he went to this man's house. The man opens the door. He sees stuff, and the Rav there asks him, "What can I do for you?" So the Rav got straight to the point. He said, "Did you lose a $100 bill today?" And the man said, "Yes, I did." He said to him, "Well, I have it. I think I'm sorry, skip the part of the story. Did you lose a $100 bill?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Did you give me a $10 donation today? $10 bill today?" He said, "Yes." So he took out the $100 bill and he said, "Here's your money. This is the money. You thought it was a $10 bill and it was really a $100 bill." Now the man was a little bit embarrassed to take it back. So he said to the Rav, "Yeah, it's okay. You can keep it." So the Rav said, "No. I only take tzedakah from people who give it b'leiv shalom, give it a full heart. You didn't mean to give me this much. So you know what? Give me a 10, you get 100, and with that, he left the man and wished him a freilich and Purim, and a joyous Purim. So there's a beautiful story about not being sensitive and caring, not allowing a person to suffer any more than they have to, even if it's not earth-shattering. In Yaakov's case, was much more. $100 bills that was a big loss in those days. So we want to be careful, want to be sensitive and caring, not to cause people suffering unnecessary, not to relieve them of suffering as soon as possible, and again, to work on an attitude of being more caring, sensitive, focused on the positive, and judging favorably. And with that, we should be able to soon to have a good judgment on Asarah Tevet. That the Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt this year. We should be able to rejoice in the Beis Hamikdash and not have to have any more of our fast days, because as the verses say, the fast days will turn into days of joy. This has been a little bit of light. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a meaningful fast.